And I'm first going to welcome each and every one of you to Medgar Evers College and really welcome you to our new AB1 academic building. Coincidentally, Moshe Patwari is here, who is the Dean of our School of Science and Technology, and he lives in this space, and we certainly think he would want you to feel comfortable here. But before we begin, I'd like to just extend greetings to some very special guests, and some of these very special guests don't know how special they are. Mr. and Mrs. Wong just happened to be coming by this afternoon, and Mr. Wong started at Medgar in 1970. He's visiting from Bedford, Massachusetts, and isn't it interesting that we're located on Bedford Avenue? So welcome to you. We're going to say, we're gonna greet Dennis Walcott a little bit later on when we go on stage, but Dennis Walcott is over to my right. We also have our Borough Vice President Yvonne Graham, who's with us. And I'd be very remiss if I did not say hello to Ola Alababi, who is one of our district persons from the area, and thank you for being here today as well. On a serious note, we're gathered here today for the first ever of several policy forums where we'll begin to explore key issues that impact our community today. We are particularly honored to have as our first guest a longtime supporter of Medgar and a friend of the college, the Honorable Dennis Walcott, Chancellor of the New York City Department of Education. We scheduled this forum today in particular to commemorate the 48th anniversary of the assassination of our college's namesake, civil rights activist Medgar Wiley Evers. He was gunned down in his driveway on June 12, 1963. His death was a clarion call for equality of access and opportunity. His life and legacy embodied in part by our college. It is embodied by a powerful symbol of it represents a powerful symbol of our continuing struggle for civil rights. And so before we begin our formal forum, it is fitting that we take a moment to recognize this moment in history. Several months ago, we began to create a medallion that is designed to celebrate Medgar Evers, the man, and represent the high standards of our institution. The medallion, which we will disclose in just a moment, is made of mirror-polished stainless steel, sand-blasted glass, and sand-blasted mirror. It features a college seal on the front and a portrait of our namesake on the back. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to now share with you the medallion. No one told me how to do this, so I'm doing it. Enjoy.
All right. I'm sorry. It's okay.
We would like to thank, as you serve, we would like to thank the Enid architects, both Joan Sliker and Todd Slyman, Douglas Morris, and Eric Herter of the design firm Poland Morris, Eric Wright, and Risa Honig from CUNY's Department of Design and Construction Management, and both Frank Tuminelli and Lakeisha Murray from our Office of Facilities for all their hard work on this project. Now, if you all join me in the auditorium, we can get started with the program. Thank you very much. Medgar Evers' work to try to integrate the University of Mississippi is indicative of the importance of the man attached to the value of higher education. The mission of our college, the mission of Medgar Evers College, is to provide for the educational needs of the Central Brooklyn community, which includes many who have been educationally underserved. We believe, as our namesake and as our city's chancellor does, that the empowerment through education is key to one's success. Our chancellor has been a tireless worker, a tireless advocate for strengthening our city schools. As a fellow social worker and as founder of the Frederick Douglass Brother to Brother Mentoring Program, as president and chief executive officer of the New York Urban League, as executive director of the Harlem Dowling West Side Center, as a member of the New York City Board of Education, and as deputy mayor for education and community engagement, I welcome our our chancellor of public education.
Or you can just call me
so much
Dennis.
going, I don't know what to call him. I do have a series of questions for Dennis, but to get us started, Dennis, why don't you just reflect with us a little bit on this day and what it might mean to you, and any thoughts you might have for the group at this time.
Sure. First, let me thank you and Medgar Evers College for sponsoring today. I mean, to me, both on the actual day itself and I think what it represents is something extremely important when we talk about the issue of equity and access and education. So I think you deserve a round of applause for launching this series. And to me, what this represents is an opportunity for us to enter into dialogue around the importance of education, the importance of equity, how we level the playing field, and also a reminder that people understand the history of Medgar Evers and what he meant, and more importantly, more important than that, I think the legacy that he left all of us as far as what we have to do in our communities as well. And I think the challenges and the goals we have to aspire to and remind our youth especially, and those who, for whatever reason, are not clued in it. But so to me, that's what today represents.
Okay, good. Let's start a little bit with your life's journey. Where are you from? Tell us about growing up in Queens.
So I was born and raised in Queens, and I still live in Queens. I live like 40 blocks away from where I grew up, and I went to elementary school in Queens, public school, went to a junior high school, public junior high school in Queens, and also a very large high school in Queens as well. And my wife and I made a conscious decision that we were going to live in Queens, and that's where I'll be until I'm no longer on this earth. I mean, for me, New York City represents, I think, a total mixture of different issues, backgrounds, nationalities, groups working together, sometimes not together. And for me, growing up in Queens, I grew up in a black neighborhood, St. Albans, in a section called Adderley Park. And it was a great time to grow up. I mean, I had both of my parents who worked for the city. My father was a high school dropout. My mother was a college grad. My mother and father are very unusual people in that my father was 13 years older than my mom, and I never got a sense of I and me with either one of them. It was always a collective spirit. I'm an only child, and it was always things working together, things being approached together by them, and that's how I grew up. My father and mother were from Harlem, and they grew up in Harlem. They were raised in Harlem. My grandparents, for the most part, Caribbean, so my paternal grandparents are from Barbados. My maternal grandfather is from St. Croix. And the neighborhood I grew up in really was a mixture of people who were city workers, teachers, nurses, people who were mechanics, so working class individuals. And it was a fantastic environment. And then I had a tragedy happen to me when I was 20 years old, in that my father died first, and then I came home from spring break a month before I was to graduate college and found my mom dead on the living room floor. So that was 9 months after my father passed away. And then I buried my mom, and then went back to school, graduated, and then I decided to stay in school and go on for my first master's, my master's in education. I knocked that out in a year, and then came back and taught kindergarten. And then taught kindergarten. I became restless probably after a year and a half. And I said, you know what? I was in South Jamaica, Queens, where I was teaching, and I was a rare individual, not rare based on intellect or talent, but just rare in that I was a black male kindergarten teacher, and you didn't see that many black male kindergarten teachers. So a lot of the boys and girls, but a lot of the boys were gravitating to me because unfortunately they didn't have fathers in their home. And so I was single at that particular point in time. And so I decided to quit my job. I went on unemployment. And that's when I founded the Frederick Douglass Brother to Brother program. And back then, this is now in the early 70s, back then the traditional Big Brother program was focused on boys between the ages of 8 through 16. And I felt it was important to focus on boys at a younger age. So I started my program for boys between the ages of 5 through 12. And I matched myself up to two little brothers who I still see, who are now big men. And one I call my revolutionary little brother, because he calls me up when he thinks I'm being too conservative or middle of the road and will chastise me about where's the revolution. And then the other little brother I still see on a regular basis as well, and I'm the godfather to his daughter. But you know, that program was a great opportunity for me and other men to get involved as far as being mentors. But then something happened in my life because I was really aggressive as far as publicizing the program. So I developed two strategies to publicize this program. One was I happened to notice in the Daily News, a black woman, wrote a story about corn rolling hair. And so I didn't know her. I did a cold call and called her up about publicizing the program. And so she wrote a full-page story. And then also I reached out to then the gentleman who was the director of community affairs at Channel 5 and said, hey, why don't you cut a PSA, a public service announcement about the program? And we worked it out where he did. And then I convinced him, and I smiled, I convinced him to air it just before Soul Train came on. And because I figured that's when you're going to have a great marketplace as far as the audience you're trying to reach. And so he aired it on a regular basis just before Soul Train. And I say that because I was still a fledgling organization and really didn't have the capacity. And I learned a lesson that I carry with me to this day, that you have to build your capacity before you grow. And you have to make sure your organizational structure, your management is in place to handle it, because a tremendous volume of requests came in for both people interested in their children being little brothers and men being big brothers. Then something else happened in my life. I met the woman who would eventually become my wife. And it's one thing to be single and unemployed, but it's another thing to be married and unemployed. Those two don't go hand in hand. And so then I approached the woman who was at my school that I had quit to start this program. She said, if you ever need any help or anything, just give me a buzz. So I called and said, I need a job. And she said, well, I don't hire people who have their masters in education, but I do have a work study program for people who have an interest in going into social work. And I did have an interest in going into social work. So then I started working at a foster care agency called Spence Chapin and going to Fordham University, sorry, not the University of Chicago, Fordham University for my social work degree, and did a work study program and was a foster care worker. And then I wanted a track in administration, so then I hooked up in my second year placement with what was then called the Greater New York Fund United Way. And I did that for 2 years. And then I got hired by them and the executive director at that time. And all these are life lessons that I try to carry as far as support, always reaching out and talking to people, because people took the time to do that for me. And then the person who was the executive director of the Greater New York Fund United Way had this belief system that if you went there to work, especially straight out of your school of social work after you got your MSW, you were only going to stay there for 5 years. And then after 5 years, you were going to be an executive director of an agency. I had no idea what the heck an executive director of an agency was at that time. But his belief was that I'm bringing you in, I'm training you, and I want you to go out and populate the field of the not-for-profit community, be an executive director. So at the 4 years and 2 months, I got my job as executive director of an agency, and I was the executive director of an agency called Harlem Dowling Children's Service, which is a child welfare agency, a foster care adoption agency. And I did that for 5 years. And then from there, I became the president of the New York Urban League, and I did that for 12 years. And then I sponsored a forum, a teen forum, where it was a forum on the political campaign coming up. And so the teens organized it through the Urban League. And we're nonpartisan because we were 501c3. And so we invited the various candidates to come. And at that time, candidate Bloomberg was running along with other people. And they came and did the presentation. I stayed in the background because the teens were the organizers of it. And as the candidate Bloomberg was leaving, he saw my Urban League pin, literally stole it off my lapel, and then wore it and said, I'll wear this until I'm no longer mayor. And so then he's been wearing the Urban League pin for 9 years now, or 10 years. And I say that because I didn't know him at all. And then eventually he won, and then they asked me to join the transition committee, and then there was a rule that if you're joining the transition committee, you're not to be trying to get a job for the administration. So I wasn't interested in getting a job. I mean, I had a billionaire that I was going to pursue as a donor to the New York Urban League. That was my focus. And so then I got a back channel call, are you interested in being a deputy mayor? And I said, well, I can't do that because I'm on the transition committee, plus I'm happy where I'm at. And they said, no, are you interested in being the deputy mayor? And so then I went for an interview, and so I interviewed with the mayor-elect at that point and 2 of his people. And they said, oh, nice interview, and we'll get back to you in a couple of weeks. I said, sure, okay, I've heard that before. And then the next day I get a call, Walcott, Bloomberg here, you want to be my deputy mayor? And I said, I'll get back to you, I have to check with my wife. And that is a true story. And so I called my wife, and I got back to him, if not that day, the next day. And I said, I'd be honored to do that. And then I became deputy mayor. And
the rest is history.
It was a great ride. It was a great ride.
Well, I'm glad to know. I'm glad to know that you listened to your wife, and since my wife is sitting in the audience today, I'm sure she's going to ask.
She's taking notes.
Take notes.
She's taking notes. Yeah. I saw her. There's notes in her head and saying, all right.
But let me go back a bit, because I had a question about your parents, and you sort of segued into that. The question now really isn't as appropriate as it was before. But the question that I was going to ask you, you and I are relatively close in age. I'm probably a few years older. And we both were witnesses of the civil rights movement as it began to emerge. And me being from North Carolina, I was a bit closer, not as close as my colleagues in Alabama and Mississippi. But you grew up north. My question would have been, how did your parents engage you, recognizing that they come out of a slightly different orientation, but how did they talk with you about what was going on down there, and given their early deaths, who did you have those conversations with? What hit you about this thing called the civil rights movement?
So it's a great question. I want to answer it a little differently than probably how you're posing it, because to me, my first experience and exposure to the civil rights movement was really in the voting booth, and seeing the results and the energy and the passion and the commitment of the people in the community around voting and what it actually meant. And so when my parents would take me to the voting booth, it was just a passion of a black neighborhood voting, and the translation of that in how people were talking in the polling place, in the school itself, and the struggles that were going down in the South, and Dr. King and Malcolm and others who were part of that, and Medgar, and all the folks who were part of that generation and that history, for me up north in New York City, really came across loud and clear in the voting booth. I mean, that's why I don't think I've ever missed an election. If so, it may have been because I was traveling one time. I haven't even missed it before a school board election. I take it as a result of the history and the passion and the commitment of the people who struggled and died for us to have the right to vote, what it meant. And so back then, I was able to vote at 18, and so by the time I turned 18, I think the first election I voted in was probably an election for mayor. And so I saw that energy and that passion and what it meant in the communication back and forth within the neighborhood I grew up in, and what my parents said to me and infused in me, and also in the dinner parties and all the other gatherings that I would attend. But to me, where it jumps off the page is really at my school in the elections, during elections. It was just that energy level to me was just so palpable as far as what it represented to the struggle and the empowerment of the people. And I just felt it loud and clear. So that's where I got it. And then the reason I mentioned about my parents passing away, and I was 20 and 21 at that point, because the other part in growing up, and this is indirectly connected to your question, but it's part of, I think, what a lot of us in this room have experienced, if not all of us in the experience, was the connection of a neighborhood and what a neighborhood meant for a child or people in being supportive to each other as well. And I always have a true story. It's funny, but it's true. I think it's funny. In that, I'll never forget, I had graduated from college. I guess I graduated with my master's at that point. So I came back home to live. I lived in my house where I grew up. And it's probably around 22 and change. And I was out late that Friday night. And I probably got in around 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. And so that Saturday I was outside raking my lawn, doing a responsible thing. And my next door neighbor came out, and a wife of a minister, matter of fact, a pastor's wife. And she said to me, Dennis, I heard what time you got in last night. And so, my parents raised me to be a very respectful person. And I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, I heard it sounded like you got, because the car I had squeaky springs, so, like it bounced in the driveway. And I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, I heard what time. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning. And now I'm a 22-and-a-half-year-old man now. And I'm saying, okay, I'm outside doing a responsible thing. And she said, just because your parents are not here doesn't mean that I stop watching out for you. And I say that in the context of the civil rights question because, to me, that's what it was all about. It was about the community. It was about the empowerment of a community. It was about the empowerment of a people and making sure that we sacrifice, the adults sacrifice for my generation, our generation, to get to that next step up the ladder, to be able to participate in what the people who struggled and died for us to have that equal opportunity was about. That's how I viewed the neighborhood and the community.
I want to avoid trying to talk about schools and education today, but you open the door just a little bit, and I'm just going to stick my head in.
I'm in your house, yes, sir.
And it's about the way we as a community today relate to one another. And I can recall growing up in North Carolina, and I shared with someone last week that my mother could go next door and get a cup of sugar. She could borrow $1. She could rest assured that if I did something ugly on the way from school, she would hear about it before I got home. What about that part of the community today, and what about that as a part of the culture that we live in today?
It's so interesting you asked that because I was speaking at a church this morning. It seemed like another day ago, but it was this morning. And I was talking about that supportive network of our community and that we have the responsibility to make sure we continue that protective envelope, that network, and dealing with the challenges of our community and not shying away from it at all. And I think it's still there, but I think we need to up our game because you have so many people who are disconnected, who are not as engaged as they should be for a host of different reasons. It's not talking ill of them, it's just a host of different reasons. And that's why with my job now as Chancellor, obviously I take it seriously, but I even take it more seriously as far as being a black man who is a Chancellor. And I make sure I take it seriously in conveying that and how I relate to our kids. And I think we as a community have a responsibility to step up our game to make sure that that protective network, the reaching out, to find ways of making sure for whatever reason that child or even that adult is not connected to the fabric of life and being able to participate in a way that we feel that person should be participating. We step to the table to do that. And I think we have the ability to do that. I think there are a lot of people who volunteer and are very engaged in that. But I think, again, we have more to do. And what existed before, even though we've made tremendous strides as a result of Medgar and others, we still have those who have not been able to participate equally in society. And that's what we have a responsibility to do as a community, as individuals, and as faith-based institutions, as colleges and universities, as community-based organizations, as a city. And we have to take a look at ways to do that.
You keep opening these doors, and
I'm glad to do that.
I'm gonna continue to walk in. You talk about being a black man and the importance of it, and it sounded like, in spite of the fact that you grew up in Queens, I grew up in North Carolina. My parents were Southern, your parents was Caribbean. There's a lot of similarities there. But when you look at the life of someone like Medgar Evers, who grew up in Mississippi, was a veteran, came home to Mississippi, and certainly could very easily be described as a black man. When you look at his life and you look at the role he played in just a short 37 years, and you look at Dennis Walcott, what do you see as similarities and differences?
Well, hopefully a similarity. I mean, it's tough. I don't like talking about myself. I mean, it's an awkward question for me because I'm very reticent in talking about myself, you know, and similarities, especially to people like Medgar Evers. So it may be a tough part of pulling out of me. But to me, one of the key things that I try to be, and I don't know if it's similar, but I would assume it is a commitment to the cause and making sure there's a continued commitment to the cause. I mean, people always love. Matter of fact, it was here, matter of fact. I was speaking to a group of social work, or when I was here for Social Work Month,
yes.
in March, and there were a group of students who were here, and then I was introduced and who I worked for, the mayor, and I remember there were a group of students who booed. And I went up to them afterwards, I said, I love you booing, because that shows you have knowledge of me or what you don't agree with, and you have that passion and commitment. I'd rather have you boo than sit silent and not care at all. And so about me, I care. I'm committed to a cause. I'm committed to a belief system of the issue of equity in education and a responsibility of a community to make sure all of our children, and that's not just black children, children in general, have an equitable education and able to go to college and have a career and be successful adults. With Medgar, he had a commitment. He gave his life as a result of that. And I mean, to me, it's important for us to have a commitment to a cause, whatever that cause may be, and following through on that. And with those students as the example, and I tell this story when I speak at times about commitment, is that they had a commitment. They had a belief system, whether they were correct or not, doesn't matter. They had a belief system and a knowledge system around the issues. To me, visibility is important. So I always liked when I was deputy mayor, they called me the quiet deputy mayor because I'm the deputy. I'm not the mayor.
You quiet?
Yeah, it was. I mean, but it was fine because that's the way I defined the job, because I was there to be the deputy to the mayor. I'm very clear. That was a staff person, and Joel was the chancellor, and then Kathy for a short period of time. As chancellor, I'm not that way because it's a different type of job and it's a different type of role. And the beauty of it is, I mean, I was at the American Museum of Natural History for a great Urban Advantage Science Fair before I came here, where we had middle schoolers from across the city at the Museum of Natural History showing their science projects. And when I mentioned that, you know, some of them recognized me. And they said, and these are middle schoolers and 6th graders, 7th graders, and 8th graders, and they would point and all. And I said, how do you know me? And so they knew me. And I say that not for ego. I say that because part of my job is to make sure, both as chancellor, people understand where I'm coming from and how I represent the Department of Education, the city, and what we're talking about. But as a black man in particular, the role that I feel that goes with this job, because I'll always be a black man. I won't be a chancellor for much longer. I got 2.5 years to be chancellor, and then that goes, which is fine. But a black man will be with me for the rest of my life. And to me, that commitment, the visibility, how I articulate the issues, how I represent for the community is extremely important, and how that resonates with the youth in particular, and seeing that, hey, I'm one of you. You know, I grew up in the hood, and I grew up and went to public school, and I'm blessed to have a great job thanks to the mayor of the city of New York. And that, to me, is that type of turnkey type of process that's extremely important for people who may not see the ability of, I mean, you know, they see us, even though I'm not in a tie today, I have a car, to know that we're not prep school kids. Right. You know, we grew up in the same neighborhoods, went to the same schools. I was not an A student, and you know, I'm proud of it. I mean, I wish I could have been an A student, but then maybe I wouldn't have been chancellor. Who knows? But you know, that balance, that you are connected in that regard. So that's how I see all that playing out.
Again, I want to push the envelope a bit about being a black man, and also in a way sharing with the audience, and also as a reminder to me as well, to help them to understand Medgar Evers. And I'd like to get your perspective on something. I'm reading the autobiography of Medgar, in his words, that was authored by his wife, Medgar Evers, and the late Manning Marable.
Yep.
And there's a section in the book in which there's a tape taken from an interview that was done with Bill Peters, I guess in 1961 or 62. And Medgar describes a situation in which he's on a bus. He's gotten on the bus in North Carolina. He's going back to Mississippi. And he has an episode in Meridian. I'd just like to share just briefly something here, and then I'm going to ask you a question. Medgar writes, I boarded the bus in Meridian, Mississippi, or said, I boarded the bus in Meridian, Mississippi, on the front seat where I sat, and was told to move by the police. Of course, I refused. I refused to move to the back of the bus after being ordered so by the driver. And after I refused, of course, he got off the bus and went and called the police in Meridian. And they conferred, and after having conferred with one another, two came on the bus and asked to see my identification. There's that identification again, Eric. I showed them my identification, and after having done that, they asked me to get back on the bus and get off the bus and come over to the police station with them, which was across the street. I went over there with them, and they asked me where I was going. Stir up trouble? I told them no. I was merely going home to my wife and children. Of course, I had two children at the time, and they said, well, you know how things are done here. I said, yes, I was born 30 miles from here, which was Decatur, Mississippi. And after some 15 or 20 minutes of interrogation, they permitted me to get back on the bus. I went and got back on the bus, and of course, I sat back on the front seat. And having refused to move again, the bus driver pulled off. I heard as we moved away a number of people say that we should go on and pull him off. Of course, I sat there, and some 3 blocks from the bus terminal, a white man boarded the bus and struck me in the face. This was about 3 o'clock in the morning. I was alone. Of course, I refused to move, and I came all the way to Jackson without any further incident. What does that communicate to you?
Belief in oneself, a pride. Again, it goes back to commitment, a passion for not being treated as a person who is less than, and making sure that one accepts that I am a strong person and I will carry out my values and my beliefs, and an individual who understood exactly what he was doing, and then the tragedy that resulted, but also the potential of what could happen by continuing to hold that belief. And to me, that's something that's extremely important. It talks about the issue of a person, she or he, having an inner core value of self, an inner core value of belief of what life is about, and the importance of making it both clear, both through actions as well as words, in how you carry that out. And so all that's rolled up into the passage you just read. And to me, it goes to the heart of, everyone has their own passion. And I'll go back to our students for a second, because I want you to be passionate about something. I want you to be knowledgeable about something. I want you to have a commitment about something, whether you agree or not. And I think, as a black community, at times we've gotten monolithic as far as you can only believe in a certain thing, and then how dare you not believe in something else. And I think and what this represents is that people had a variety of ways of carrying out their beliefs. And we should never stereotype an individual based on where she or he is coming from as far as a belief system, but people are committed around a particular cause for a reason. And then also what it said, I just thought about it as I was talking. This was at 3 o'clock in the morning. This was not with press doing it for a photo op. This is obviously a man who was committed to the cause of right versus wrong. And all that has to be a part of what guides us in life, and not doing things only because a camera is there and it's convenient, but doing things because you have a true core value and belief around what it represents, and to do it not just when the camera is there, but to do things, say things, act on things when the cameras aren't there.
Dennis, I got one final formal question, and then we're going to allow the audience to raise questions if they would. And if no one asks a question, I'm sure that we'll get Eric Adams to raise a question for us.
See Eric there?
Yeah.
No, you got before. No, see, I didn't know Eric was there because when did you come in?
A little while ago.
At where I first started working? No, there's a reason I'm asking this. Did you come in at that point when where Oh, no. See, I'm embarrassed, Eric, now. I'm sorry. Because I've known Eric since he was 8 years old.
Okay.
Because Eric's mother and I worked together. That first job after when I was a kindergarten teacher.
Okay.
And so.
He's a great teacher.
Thank you, Eric. And, his mom, how was your mother? Give me my regards. So anyhow, I didn't know Eric was there, but no, there's a nice connection. Eric and I don't normally talk about that when he's yelling at me. I don't want people to know we have that I knew you as a kid.
All right, here's my last formal question. I will have others perhaps, but depending on time and what happens with the audience. If Medgar were alive today, and if Medgar had an opportunity to walk around with you, and you had the occasion to speak with him, what would you like to say to him? What would you say to him?
Yeah, it's interesting. It wouldn't be what I say to him. It would be what I would ask him more than anything else.
Okay.
I mean, one of the things as I've gotten older and I value more and more are those individuals who've been in the struggle, in a variety of struggles. And so I was with a friend of mine last week or 2 weeks ago now, and his mom is now 92, and his uncle's 97. And his uncle is sharp as a tack, and his uncle grew up down south in, I think it was Mississippi or Alabama. And I was just peppering his uncle with questions. I mean, I was asking him questions like crazy. I mean, I was a little child. I mean, I am, I guess, for a 97-year-old. And for Medgar, I mean, it wouldn't be what I would say. It'd be what I would ask and listen to and learn from and, really get a sense. I mean, I really want to really be a part of learning history more and more from individuals who are part of history itself. So I would just be a kid as far as Medgar or others if that opportunity presented itself, just to hear about the struggles, but also the strategy. I mean, to me, strategy is so important in life, and thinking out steps, not reacting just to the immediate, but really thinking long-term as far as how certain strategies play themselves out, and then how you really build a coalition and how you make the sacrifices and what it actually means to your family life and those who are in public life and who make sacrifices, and how you preserve the balance of your family life and others. And that, to me, is part of it. But I think the interaction, especially back then, what it meant, I mean, I'm just a northern boy who is the beneficiary of people like Medgar and others who died and sacrificed for the cause of us being in this position. I would never been in a position to have this job if people didn't have that. So I would just be like a student on the knees of an elder, trying to pepper that person with as many questions as possible. When I was talking to my friend's uncle, I was just listening. I mean, it was beautiful just to see a 97-year-old as sharp as he was. And he was talking about the struggles and the sacrifices, and then, what it meant back then. There was another gentleman who happened to grow up in the same small town he did. And so he's my age, and they were comparing notes and just listening to the dialogue and how this person, who is my contemporary, asked him questions around what it was like then, and just to hear the back and forth between the two of them was fascinating. So for me to be in that position, it wouldn't be me saying something, it would be me asking and listening and learning and constantly trying to pick up on it.
If you've got a question and want to line up the mic, please do so. And while you're on your way, Nancy, what do you think Medgar might say to this generation? What do you think he might say to us today?
It's interesting just seeing Eric here. Pull up your pants, Juan. And I think that is key. I mean, it really is time to get serious and telling us as adults, we better get serious with what's going on with our youth and how we have to make sure we are not just talking about, but we are acting on the convictions of what people did back then. I mean, anytime you have a 16-year-old who's at Brighton Beach going to the beach to swim, and then somebody decides, for whatever reason, because of a look, because of a foot being stepped on, or glare, or whatever the case may be, decides to pull out a gun, and we lost a 16-year-old child. That's unacceptable. And so Medgar was saying, what are you doing stepping up to the plate to talk about that and address that issue? Are you staying silent? Are you outraged? I mean, are you concerned enough where you're going to voice it? More than voicing it, do something about it? How are we going to challenge the community? I mean, to me, and I'm not a student of Medgar, so I'm just going to project, are we going to talk and challenge the community? It's one thing to challenge government, and government should be challenged all the time. But it's another thing when you step up to the plate to challenge the community and stop staying silent and saying that type of behavior is acceptable. I don't care if you're black, white, Latino. A 16-year-old died as a result of someone doing something or saying something, and it was unrelated to anything that is relevant in life. And so Medgar was saying, what are we going to do to step up to address this? I've been to, or I know of, too many youth funerals where our youth in our communities are dying at the hand of the youth who are the same color. That's unacceptable. How are we going to handle it as a community? What is our role in society in addressing that? Are we going to step to the plate, or are we going to allow it to continue to spiral down like that? So to me, it's the challenging of the community and saying life is unacceptable. Yes, we have to bring government to task, but at the same time, we have responsibility from our faith-based leaders to our community organizations to those who are just the regular folks in the hood saying enough is enough, and we're not going to tolerate it.
So it may well be that the legacy we adopt from men like Medgar Evers is what we do today to make their sacrifices worth what has taken place.
We can never talk about the issue of equity when we lose our kids before they become adults, and equity will never be in existence for them at all because they died too early. And so I think we have a responsibility to constantly do what you just said, and Medgar, I think, would be in a position to challenge us to make sure we step up our game in the community.
Okay. We got time for just a couple of questions, so we're going to go with Nancy Lester.
Hi, and thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Mr. President, for arranging this. It's great. It's hard to stay away from education questions. I'm in the education department. You are the Chancellor. I have two questions, and maybe you'll see a relationship. I think I do, and certainly only one question? Okay. Could you comment on your response and the entire NAACP challenge to charter schools that was just recently in the paper?
So I'm going to stay away from what's going on back and forth right now with NAA because we always continue to talk, and I'm not going to exacerbate what's already been in the press. What I will say is my own belief around, I'm a big believer in options. I'm a big believer that parents have a right to choose options, and whether those options are small schools, single-sex schools, charter schools, large high schools, theme schools, we as a system have a responsibility to present quality options, and I want to put quality options for our students. When it comes to the issue of the lawsuit, we'll play that out and see what happens over the next week. But I'm just a big believer in options and making sure equity is across the board as far as those options.
Okay. Motion.
Thank you, President, for organizing this event, and thank you, Chancellor, for coming. It's a general question. Chancellor, as you know that the science is the future. Our competitiveness as a nation in future would depend on how good we are in science and math. As you are aware of that, we are falling behind a number of nations in science and math. As a Chancellor, what is your plan to make science interesting in the school system, school level, and to make our kids competitive in science and health and technology?
So let me respond a couple of ways. One, a week ago Saturday, I hosted a meeting with roughly 1,700 principals and administrators at Brooklyn Tech, where we were talking about our new Common Core standards and the new system of curricula we're going to put in place for our school system. And then on Monday, I hosted a meeting with 700 PTA presidents and parent coordinators, High School of Fashion Industries. First time we ever had all the PTAs and some of the parent coordinators together, again, talking about our Common Core standards, where we're going with our new curricula and how we're going to put it in place as well. And then on Tuesday, I did something that I said, oh boy, do I want to push the send button on this. I sent out an email to 75,000 teachers. Again, reinforcing where we're going with Common Core, and it's been great. And then I'll be doing something over the next several weeks. And I mention that in the context of your question because Common Core is a new level of curriculum that we're going to be putting in place that's going to deal with critical thinking, critical analysis, and not bubble tests. And we're having people be able to think in a way that is in a more deeper and theoretical way as far as issues are concerned. Part of that is dealing with the sciences and dealing with math. And what we're going to do is gradually phase it in because it'll be part of a national standard, well, statewide standard and national standard. And part of what came out a week ago, Saturday, at the retreat we had with the principals and the administrators is doing more with less. And so instead of skipping around from subject to subject to subject within math or within science, concentrating on 2 or 3 things and having those elements as part of the curriculum itself. So then we understand and the students understand exactly what they're being taught and able to think critically around what they're being taught versus not being totally there on this area, then moving to this area and they don't have the foundation from the past. And by getting it into richer type of dialogue and discussion and type of testing that'll go on, like not A, B, C, D, but really having paragraphs talking about the analytical information, whether it's in science and numeracy or literacy, then you start stair-stepping and building off the strengths of our students. So that's one way of addressing the sciences and math and on English on the literacy side around more content-rich type of activities. The other thing, and I was saying this to our press folks earlier, is that I'm on a warpath about something in that there's a lot going on in our system as far as science and math, or the STEM area, as we call it. And just people don't know about it. So today's event at the Museum of Natural History, it was great. There were students, probably 900 to 1,000 students from across the city who had all these fantastic projects. And the press wasn't there. Maybe one media outlet was there. Around 3 weeks ago, I was up at Harlem at a District 5 STEM event. And there was 1,000+ students, many middle school students from Central Harlem, District 5, showcasing their math and science projects with their parents and all. No press at all. The week before that, I was in Washington Heights at a math-elite competition. So it was a great competition thought up by one of the principals of our schools, which has grown every year, where they have math competition of middle school students, again, students of all racial and ethnic backgrounds, competing in math, and then schools winning as a result of that. And they had cheerleaders and math leaders and all that stuff, cheering and competing for their schools. It was an exciting day. And the reason I said I'm on the warpath, my goal is to make sure these type of events are covered, so then it spreads the word that there are students of all background who love sciences. I was with a student today who was telling me, I love science, and they had an opportunity to interact with scientists, to get into their schools, to work with them on the projects. Again, these are middle schoolers. So it's trying to, one, expand that, and with the Urban Advantage program, the program for today, it has grown year after year after year. Now if we can get people to see it beyond the people who were there, it then reinforces that it's cool to love science. It's really cool to love math, even though I may not have been good in it. I mean, others are there who want to tap into that, but they may be fearful as a result of people saying, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, and being outed as something negative when it really is something positive. And to me, spreading that gospel, spreading that word is something that you'll see, but also from a curriculum point of view is really deepening the teaching of what it actually means around a project, and not just jumping from lesson to lesson to lesson. And I think that's when you start to really build on the scientific as well as the math side of the area of interest and the understanding and carrying that forward to the next grade.
The final question, and then we'll have a final word from Dennis.
Hi, good afternoon.
Sir, how are you?
and President Pollard. My name is Shaffer Jack Jr. I'm a senior at Medgar Evers College, and I'm also a sub-para. I had a question regarding the pay. I was wondering if you were aware of the delay for both paras and sub-paras when it came to receiving their checks on time.
No, but you know what? Now I am. And I say that because before this administration, when I was deputy mayor and the mayor first started, there was the same type of issue with new teachers when they first started, and there was a delay of a couple of months, and we found that unacceptable, and we put in place policies to try to correct that, where they got paid not as soon as they started, but that next pay period right after. What's the lag time like? And this is an ongoing thing, or when you first start?
Well, I've been subbing for 3 years, but this problem is new for me. I think this is probably a 3-week, 4-week.
4-week lag? Each
Yeah.
time you sub?
No, not each time. It's happened a few times where if I'm new to the school or the district,
Oh, okay. Mhm.
and they don't have the records prior to the school I was at, so they didn't put it in right away. So the payroll secretary would miss the deadline, and I wouldn't receive a check that pay period, but the following one. So without me knowing, it's not my fault. It's just that the records of me subbing weren't put in for that school right away.
So when I get home this evening, I'll shoot an email out to find out what's going on, and hopefully you'll see an improvement, if not this immediate cycle, whatever that next cycle is for you, but the following cycle, because we have a responsibility. I mean, one of the things I want to try to do, and I say this, and I say it in seriousness, even though it sounds like a joke. I'm like a 2-year-old right now, and I constantly ask why. And so I've been going around asking why around a variety of topics. So now you just give me a new why to ask and why it exists, and see what we can do to turn it around.
Okay.
Thank you, sir, for bringing it to my attention.
Thank you for your questions. Final thoughts.
I just want to compliment you. I mean, I think this is an outstanding opportunity for people to really come out and, as you said, talk about the legacy of Medgar Evers, what it meant to all of us, but also for the college and university to really talk about, the vision of where you're going and having serious discussions around topics. Because a lot of times, all of us in our respective jobs, we get, tied up into a variety of things that are not part of the core mission of why we are doing what we're doing, or what the university or the organization is supposed to be doing. So I think this really is a stepping stone of building on that. It's good to have intellectual, thoughtful discussions around topics, and to really have people really gain from that. And I think this lays the foundation. So I just want to compliment you for this, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dennis. And I want to thank this audience for coming out today, and I want to promise you that they won't be regular, but we will have a series of discussions going forward. And I've got some ideas now as I look to my senator to the right, and perhaps we might have some future discussions about violence in our communities, because many of us are tired of seeing our young people killed by one another, and perhaps we might have a discussion to look at some ways that we can approach that. So thank you all for coming out this evening, and we want to especially thank the Wongs who just happened by, graduates, Mr. and Mrs. Wong. Mr. Wong attended Medgar, and we want to thank all of you for coming out this evening. Come to the mic, quickly, yes. We got time for him to go to the camera, to the mic.
Mr. Chancellor, Mr. President, I just wanted to take a moment and thank you all for this, receiving us, my wife and I, just coming back here to Medgar Evers College and being a proud alumni and graduate some very many years ago in one of the pioneering classes with the Natural Science Division. And one thing in common, I think I'd just like to extend, and that is, even during that time, we all felt, faculty and students alike, we all had a mission to accomplish in this very small college, trying to make a name for ourselves in the central Brooklyn area. And I've come to know over the years that the students, the faculty, the organization here has done a tremendous job in bringing forth one mission, and that is to accomplish and to bring forth people in this part of the world into a good professional career, and in the name of Medgar Evers. And we're all very proud of that. And thank you once again, and keep on keeping on. That's all I can say.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.